President Trump scored two big legal victories from the Supreme Court yesterday. Both center on immigration. The first ruling allows the White House to remove legal protections from hundreds of thousands of immigrants from Haiti and Syria. That paves the way for the administration to deport people from those countries who were given what's known as temporary protected status. In another decision handed down yesterday, the divided court ruled that someone looking to enter the U.S. at the southern border cannot claim asylum while still standing on Mexican soil. Why? Because they're not technically in the United States. They must have already crossed the border to claim asylum. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Misty Marris and NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley, who is in Washington. Good morning to both of you. Julia, let's start with you. This ruling that removes these legal protections, how big of a victory is this for the Trump administration? And then what kind of action could we see as a result of this decision?
It's a huge victory, Joe. It's yet another time where this Supreme Court has taken power away from federal courts and given more power to the executive branch. Because what this ultimately came down to is whether or not federal judges could tell the Trump administration, no, you're not in a position to remove these protected statuses because the conditions in the countries that you're talking about have not improved. It's still not safe to send anyone back to those countries. So right now it applies to people coming from Haiti and Syria. That's 350,000. But there have been other times where the Trump administration has tried to remove protections and been stopped, like in many of the African countries, like South Sudan, for example. There was an attempt for El Salvador. Right now that is continuing through the fall. But there are a number that could definitely end very soon. And now that they have this new authority given to them by this opinion, they can go back and try to tell those judges that those opinions that they had to block them in the first place are no longer valid, given what the Supreme Court said.
Misty, let's bring you in here. This is something we've seen before. A 6-3 vote along ideological lines. In the dissenting opinion, the liberal Justice Elena Kagan argued race was a factor for President Trump. Walk us through what the main legal arguments were here.
So in the dissent, there were three main legal arguments. The first is a narrower view of the statute at issue. And Justice Kagan in her dissent, joined by two other justices, said that the court can review at least the procedural steps that need to be taken when removing temporary protected status. So that's one argument. The other argument is that there was heavy race-based bias when removing temporary protected status, specifically with regard to Haiti. And she pointed to, in the decision, saying that there were statements made by the executive, meaning President Trump, so repellent and racially inflected that the majority declines to put them in print, speaking about the opinion that was written. And so that when making that determination with regard to Haiti, that race played a factor. And the dissent says that that was improper. And last is what we call a public policy argument, that there are real world consequences to this determination, putting people in significant risk being sent back to their countries and putting them in danger while there's a litigation playing out, and even saying that these individuals could be put on the next plane. So those were the three core arguments raised by the dissent.
Julia, let's turn to the second case where people can claim asylum, whether they are physically in the U.S. versus just right across the border. This might seem like a small change, but explain the history behind this and the impact this decision is going to have.
Well, it might not make an immediate impact on what's happening at the border, because already it's very hard for anyone to be able to cross the border and claim asylum, even if they are on U.S. ground, because of these policies that Trump administration put in on day one, even if they're claiming asylum legally at the border or between ports of entry. They've really made a huge asylum crackdown across the border. But this goes back to another policy that started almost a decade ago that said, when Trump first came into office, it said that if you were standing on the Mexican side of the border, but you could see U.S. authorities because there's really a buffer zone in many cases, or you might be walking up to a port of entry, if you're in line, is that a time that you could make an asylum claim? And right now the Supreme Court is siding with that previous policy that was put in place by the first Trump administration to say, no, if you're on the Mexican side of the border, you cannot make an asylum claim. So while that may seem small and immediately applicable process, this does have very big implications because the Trump administration over and over again has tried to curb the rights of people to claim asylum at the border, and even people who are already in the United States who are trying to claim asylum, like those people with temporary protected status now. And so this could mean when they do get a decision that they'll have to make later on about the current asylum policies, they could again side with the Trump administration and decide that this is really up to the executive branch on how it wants to determine who gets asylum at the border.
Misty, for this case, a lot of the focus is on the word arrive. And let's be clear, there's some very clear tensions here between the justices, specifically Alito and Sotomayor. Help us understand how each side saw this word, how it's used differently.
Yeah, so it's funny because when you're talking about the Supreme Court, there's so many legal technicalities that we always get into. And here, this particular decision hinges on the plain meaning of the word arrive. So the majority opinion says that arrive means what it means when you look in the dictionary, that you don't arrive somewhere until you're actually physically on U.S. soil. You don't arrive to the United States until you've actually crossed into it. So you cannot seek asylum, basically, in this process called metering that Julia just explained. People can be turned away at the border. They have not technically arrived on U.S. soil and therefore cannot seek asylum until they do so. Now, on the flip side, Justice Sotomayor in the dissent said, arriving is when you get to the place where you are seeking help. So it does not actually require stepping over that border. And those are the tensions of the two sides. Ultimately, the majority determining the word arrive means what it means in the dictionary. You don't arrive until you get there. Justice Alito saying, you don't get a touchdown until you're in the end zone, to use that analogy. So it really was a decision that hinged on that plain language of the word arrive.
Julia, very, very quickly here, we have a week left expecting decisions, still some major decisions expected, including birthright citizenship, right?
Yeah, that's right. And of course, we saw a glimpse last year into how the justices were viewing birthright citizenships, saying that they couldn't knock down President Trump's executive order trying to end birthright citizenship nationally when only one district or one circuit is weighing in on that. So already seen a glimpse into their thinking, at least on the logistics of ending birthright citizenship. But now the Supreme Court will have to weigh in on whether or not it's a violation of the 14th Amendment for the president to say that only children born to U.S. citizens or people with legal permanent status here are considered U.S. citizens, because throughout much of this country's history, it has been that if you were born on U.S. soil, you are a U.S. citizen for life. This also comes as the Trump administration is ramping up efforts to denaturalize people, meaning if you became a U.S. citizen while you were here and they decide you've done that fraudulently or you've committed a crime that is egregious since then, they may have a way of denaturalizing you. So a lot of emphasis on citizenship, and it will be really interesting to see how this court weighs in on that and what they say about it.
More to come next week. Julia and Misty, thank you both. Appreciate it.